Matthieu to our Kuja Pamoja series. And you know me, you're talking to me. I'm Linda Kuvheya. I'm a strategist at Triasaco. And today's conversation is part of our Kutunga platform, where we bring in innovators to share with us their contributions as part of the social innovation agenda. So it's a privilege for me to host this discussion on a topic that is generating a huge level of interest in the waste management industry right now across the globe. As you know, Matthieu, I'll just jump right into, background, and then you can answer a few questions after that.
Sure. Yeah. First of all, thank you for hosting me and for having me here. And yeah, I'm looking forward to this discussion.
Awesome. So since the Industrial Revolution, our economies have grown following a linear pattern to use natural resources consisting basically of taking, making, using, and discarding. And this was all based on a false premise that the resources are infinitely available. And, we totally know that these things have an end, but however, that pattern, we know that it cannot sustain us. We cannot stand on it. If we continue on the same path, it means we are just, sitting on the red button that's, self-destruct, we are having these conversations because of a concept called the circular economy. And that envisages a similar system, a system where after make and use stages, materials are recovered, they are processed into a new cycle of production and use. And for materials to be recovered and to be returned to the next level of production, they need to be clearly defined, and in a circular economy, materials can be defined as either biological or technical materials. Biological materials are used to make the so-called consumption products, which we get consumed. We use them such as soap, shampoo, and then they weigh off those also that weigh off, such as clothes or shoes or cars. And then, technical also fall, cars also fall under technical, and cell phones, etc. And they are non-renewable, and often some of these also produce waste that is harmful to human health and the environment. Yeah, so you have been in this space, recycling is usually downcycling, whereby materials lose their quality with each cycle. But we know that it is possible for recycling to actually be upcycling, where quality improves, with each cycle. So Matthieu, you're the CEO of Kudoti, and I deliberately didn't talk much about you in the beginning, but now is the time so that you just, tell us more about Kudoti and yourself, and then you can start telling us, about how you came up with the idea of creating Kudoti and how do you work.
Yeah, thank you very much, Linda. So my name is Matthieu. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Kudoti. Kudoti, we're based in South Africa. We started in South Africa. And so, just I guess a bit on myself. I'm half French, half American. I grew up in France and the US. And then, I think really the origin story for me in terms of starting Kudoti and, doing the work that I'm doing now is kind of right after university, I moved to Cambodia in Southeast Asia, where I actually worked as a journalist. So not at all related to what I'm doing now. I found it very interesting, but really during that time working in Cambodia, I think that's when I first came face to face to seeing what unmanaged waste looks like. And if you want to put it another way, what a very non-circular economy looks like, where there's, the problem of waste was actually very visually apparent. And so that got me really thinking, of how do we actually remedy this? And I think at that point, I wasn't even thinking in terms of circular economy, and it's just kind of I started from a very low knowledge base and really developed an understanding of what it actually is to develop and grow a circular economy as I worked on Kudoti. And so I cut the story short. I did a few things in between, but then I ended up moving to South Africa in late 2018, where I was lucky to meet my co-founders. And together we started Kudoti, and really with a mission of providing solutions that will enable a circular economy at scale, and starting with South Africa, where kind of we really wanted to implement it and trial our solutions and our thinking around building a circular economy. Awesome. So maybe kind of to introduce Kudoti itself, so Kudoti, we're essentially a technology company focused entirely on leveraging the power of technology to build circular economies. So today we deploy software. We're working with mainly large brands and municipalities as well and governments to essentially help track waste data on waste amounts, waste locations, and we use this information to build supply chains for waste. And we believe that actually the circular economy and adding value to waste comes mainly through the framework of supply chains, where you actually need to interconnect different players together, where you have visibility over the flow of waste. There's a clear and shared identification of value around the waste that enables the incentivization for its collection, sorting, and recycling. And all this comes together through technology, through data at scale. So just at a very high level, that's what we do at Kudoti.
Awesome. And that's really, really exciting. And maybe you can tell us more about, how you have managed to expand and get out of South Africa, and what are the differences there? We know South Africa is a little bit advanced in terms of technology and the economy in South Africa compared to many African countries. And I know you've been working in Zambia. I also know you've been working in India, but maybe you can tell us about Zambia, your experiences. What are the differences between, the way you're operating there, and does the platform, is it operating the same way? And what is the uptake also in that, in the Zambian economy?
Yeah. So, I think for us being in South Africa, it's a really interesting position where we're really in the middle between emerging economies and more developed economies, in the sense that South Africa has a bit of both, right? It's kind of, it itself is sitting in between those two categories. So at the same time, we can work on frameworks that are maybe more relevant to more developed or kind of high tech or more advanced situations, and at the same time kind of the opposite of that. So today in South Africa, we work essentially across the entire value chain. So we're connecting with informal waste collectors who are working in the townships, and really the first the bottom layer of the pyramid, where they're going out and collecting waste in a very manual way for income. So we engage with those type of actors all the way up to large international brands and governments as well. So the diversity of experiences that we've had is really interesting. And you're right to point out that we are looking outside of South Africa as well for our growth, including Zambia. And Zambia is relatively similar to South Africa in terms of how we operate. We haven't actually needed to change how we work in Zambia, which I think is a very positive sign for us. And I think we do believe that to some extent, what we do is applicable, Africa-wide. And again, we're able to do this because we've already learned how to engage across the different layers of the value chain, going from these very informal settings to very kind of more corporate and formalized settings. So, it's been very interesting for us to enable us to work in those different settings. And in fact, that also, gets us thinking, about how we might work even in the longer term, even beyond Africa, in either more developed markets like Europe or the US, or in other markets like in Asia, for example. So and we are having those discussions. So I think what I'll close out with on that point is, what's really interesting for us is that nobody really in the world has solved this problem of building a circular economy. And one reason why we're so excited about working in South Africa and in Africa is, we think that Africa can actually lead the way globally in terms of identifying ways of building a circular economy. So really, the reason why we work here is very specific to that point, where we think that the way to move forward is to actually develop solutions in Africa, because that's where the conditions are the best for developing new solutions around this problem. And so, I think what we're seeing is that we would then be able to grow ourselves in Europe or the US from the learnings we have in Africa as to how we build a circular economy. And that's really exciting.
Thanks so much. Yeah, it is exciting. And, when you mentioned the fact that Africa should actually lead the way, I felt really good because I think that's one thing that has been, like, Africa has been overlooked we have been overlooking on ourselves as well, for a long time. And we're just coming to a point where we realizing that we should really, stand up and change our own condition, because nobody, is going to do that for us. So it's a good thing when I heard you saying that, Africa can actually lead the way in identifying these opportunities for, building a circular economy. It's really good to hear that. Matthieu, maybe, you can tell us a little bit more about the online platform itself, how does it actually work? What are the challenges that you've faced, maybe we're in the development stages, and maybe as you are using it now, what are the lessons that are and probably you can also just jump into, advising other young people who are trying some innovative stuff, using tech and, yeah, if you can do that, yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, thanks. So I guess I'll start on kind of, Kudoti and how it works. So essentially, we're an online platform, a cloud-based platform, where we essentially look to connect waste to opportunities. And diving into actually what that means, we work with waste collectors, going from informal collectors to actual formalized waste management and waste collection companies. And we're tracking data with them on what waste is being collected, what types of waste, how much waste, where that waste is. And this data point then enables us to allow for people to trade and create essentially a marketplace for waste materials, where from the data, we can then, we have information on the supply, and then we can link in the demand, where, we're looking at manufacturers, at recyclers who actually have a need for this waste, and they're looking for materials to purchase. And I think that actually, that point is really key, where, when we deal with waste, we're not dealing with what we kind of generally consider as waste. We're dealing actually with a commodity that has value, that is a needed input for a manufacturing process. And so really the entire purpose of what we do is to really be able to very precisely identify that value and connect it to the right opportunity, where waste then maximizes its opportunity to become a commodity. And that's true, today we work with plastics, with paper and cardboard products, with metals, glass, and even we're working with beverage manufacturers, where we're not looking to even recycle the glass, but to actually reuse glass bottles, like a beer bottle or a wine bottle, and actually be able to reuse it as it's already originally been created. So that's essentially, we're collecting data on these waste volumes, waste inventory, if you will, in kind of almost an e-commerce sense, linking that to the demand, and then providing traceability over the entire process. And that's where our work with brands and governments comes in, where the data that we're collecting and the traceability that we're providing has value to these brands, because whether for legal reasons or for kind of corporate, social and innovation reasons, they need that data to prove to their stakeholders that they're helping improve the recycling value chain. They're reducing their own impact when it comes to waste, in the sense that these brands are putting out the waste onto the market. They want to prove to people that they're helping to bring back waste into the manufacturing value chain. And so we're using our data to help them essentially work towards those objectives. And we like to use the term zero waste impact. And that's really what we're trying to achieve with a brand, is to say, we're going to help you reach zero waste impact by essentially measuring how much waste you've helped to capture back into the system. And then I think just the last point I'll say on that is the brands and governments have a role to play in the creation of value or assignment of value when it comes to waste, in the sense that waste has a market value in terms of its material composition, but we need to, oftentimes we're seeing a need to actually add an additional value, which is more of a social or environmental value that is given by the brands or governments to actually raise even more the value of the waste, which is then what incentivizes people to actually go out, collect, sort, and recycle the waste. So that, essentially we're building this ecosystem where waste is traded as a commodity, and we're making sure that the value of that waste is maximized by linking in the brands and governments that have also an incentive to make sure that it gets recycled.
Awesome, awesome. Matt, this is a very interesting conversation. You mentioned governments and the private sector. And I think one of the challenges that we've had as we trying to solve different challenges in the social sector is, blaming each other for the problems that are there, and without really trying to sit down together and understand to say, how can we work to solve the particular problem together rather than fight against each other. And I think, it's the fact that the corporates and government are working together to understand that we have a problem and we need to solve this problem together. We are all each one of us, even at an individual level, we have a responsibility. So, in relation to that, Matthieu, maybe you can tell me a bit more about which are the actors that are involved in that space, because you already spoke about government and the private sector. You mentioned earlier again that you're working from an informal level as well. So maybe you can give us a little bit more detail, because I think that's what, that problem, dissolving the problem, if I can put it like that. Yeah, so maybe just tell me a little bit more about the other actors that you're working with and how you work with them.
Right. So, I think the way to look at it is that it's really a puzzle where every single piece of that puzzle needs to be fitted together for the system to work, right? And when it comes to waste, there's a pretty complicated value chain, that is there, where waste starts being waste, where it's produced by a household or a business or industry, and then it needs to essentially be processed all the way up to being, again, an input to a manufacturing or industrial process. Between those two steps, there's a number of steps, and essentially the complexity of the circular economy is to coordinate and link those steps together. Now, I think an analogy that people can use to think about this is, you can think about it as in terms of traditional supply chains, right? Where to get a banana in your fridge, or to get bread in your house, there's also been a series of steps that had to happen for that to take place. Exactly. And so now we're looking at essentially the reverse of that, right? Where how do we kind of flip that and create the same process but in reverse. And so our role, I think, is to really, as a technology company, is to really enable the environment where that value chain can come together. And I think that every step of the process is important in its own way. Obviously, it starts with households and consumers, and or businesses, or producers of waste, who have where we actually need those entities to be the first layer of the value chain, sorting the waste out into its separate waste streams as much as possible. And then it goes to a collection entity, whether that's an informal collection entity or a formal one, who then takes care of further sorting, transporting, and taking essentially the waste forward in the flow of the value chain. So and I think it goes from there to an aggregator. It gets processed in different layers, and ultimately getting to that point where it's input again to or a raw material. What I would say is, beyond just the actors themselves, I think it's important to understand what brings these separate entities together into a functioning ecosystem, or into a functioning supply chain. And that's where really the concept of incentive comes in, right? I think, we're working in, we're huge optimists and positivists when it comes to our work, but we also understand that, for an action to take place, there needs to be a very clear incentive for the person doing that action. And I think that goes beyond just ethical and kind of social norms that people might have. It has to go to actually being a tangible value that one can perceive by performing a certain action. So here again, that action for us is essentially helping the flow of waste move through the supply chain in an effective way. So going even down to the households, right? I think for the narrative at the household level is that we have a responsibility to sort waste, and that's certainly true. But I think that we are owed also an incentive to to perform the work that we do at a household level, right? I think it's not enough to just say that we're responsible. We need to be, households need to be brought into a supply chain by actually being part of the supply chain in a very tangible and concrete way. So I think this is not something that we do yet today, but it's something that I think we as a company and the industry in general is moving towards, is to say, how do we actually incentivize, not only incentivize households to be an effective role player in the supply chain, but actually make it very easy for them to do that. Because that's another problem, is that even if you're very socially conscious, environmentally conscious, it's still extremely difficult to be an effective household and recycle your waste properly. I mean, it's not made easy, and it should be made much easier to understand, what's recyclable, what's not recyclable, where different items go in the different recycling streams. So again, there's making it easy, and then actually giving people an incentive to say, okay, well, I need to recycle this, because behind there's a perceived value that I can obtain. And that is in different countries, they've tried different ways of doing that. I think the most effective one has been bottle return schemes, where you get a fee for returning a bottle, and that's a very simple and effective way of incentivizing people. And I think we need to understand, how can we do that, apply that to on a broader scale, to say, people need to have that incentive to be able to be effective players in the value chain. And I think that's really one of the big problem areas, because everyone else currently has a more direct access to incentive. The collectors, they're doing that because they're getting paid for the waste that they're collecting and sorting. And in fact, a problem there is more that there aren't enough waste streams that have value for for a collector to go out and pick out all the waste, right? If you, in South Africa, for example, if you follow some of the waste collectors, you'll see that they're leaving behind a lot of the waste because it has no value to them. So, again, you need to those waste types to value, so that waste collector then can understand the incentive that he has, or he or she has in sorting and transporting that waste. So that's just kind of I think at a very high level, where this all comes together is incentive, creating the right incentives for the right behavior.
Yeah, and you gave the very good example of bottle returns, where you bring in a bottle and they give you some money for it, but there are other ways to incentivize which might not actually be money. So if, for example, I'll give an example of washing powder, maybe, or fabric softener. If it can be put in a container where people can just come and take it in the shop using their own container, and the thing measures and gives you a slip to say, this is what you took and this is how much it is. And we completely remove the plastic from the whole, we completely remove the plastic from the whole space. Yeah. So those are some of the things that are actually happening in other countries, they are already, but
on that, I think that's a really good example. And I think it goes also to the role of brands, and essentially what you described, people are doing that as well because they're getting a discount on the product that they're using, right?
Yes, exactly.
And brands can play that role of creating incentives through discounts and value kind of sharing value in that way. So I think that's a really good point. Yeah.
And it reduces the cost, a lot, even on the side of the company, because the plastic is not just plastic. You have to brand it, and you have got to pay for all of those things as well. And the packaging, it's all costs, So I think it's something that is actually a win-win for both on both sides, and helping, us to save the planet as well.
Exactly.
Yeah. But leading to that, I just wanted to ask you, as Kudoti, in your growth, what do you see what else do you think you're going to add onto what you're doing in terms of using technology in the waste management space?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of stuff. I'll just mention, I think, one in particular and this is a very long-term view for us. But we've talked essentially a lot about recycling today, and actually you did allude to reuse as well.
Yes.
And I think it's very important for people to understand that recycling is just one tool in the circular economy, and in fact, it's one of the least favored tools in the sense of its positive impact in the circular economy. I think there's a hierarchy of things we should do, which is, first reduce the amount of waste and packaging in the first place, and then actually reuse items and packaging as much as possible. So I think an area for us is really interesting is, we also are focused as a company very much on recycling, but we're starting to work on reuse with glass bottles, for example, and beverage manufacturers. And I think we essentially want to come to a point where we're able to identify the best case scenario for any given situation. So to say, in this situation, reuse is the action that will have the greatest amount of impact from a life cycle stage, taking into account, carbon emissions as well, and cost, and actual getting, materials flowing in a circular way. Maybe reuse, and often reuse is the best way to do that. So we want to work a lot more on the reuse use case, where we're essentially, helping people who are creating reusable products track those in the system, and making that reuse user journey is as easy and as efficient as possible. So I think that's probably the next evolution for us, is to really evolve past just recycling to also working very much in the reuse space from a technology perspective.
Awesome. Yeah, there is so much to talk about in this. And as you're talking, a lot of things are coming to my mind as I was actually thinking about, cars and cell phones, and, the whole concept of ownership of products, like the way we do now. We buy laptops and it's yours, and if it's dead, it's yours, and then sometimes there's no incentive for selling it because the technology doesn't even suit that computer anymore. So a lot of e-waste piling in our homes, cell phones, computer is working on WhatsApps, I think. So some of those things are just things that, it's a long conversation, and I'm sure we're going to call you again sometime. And
maybe
then,
I'd be more than happy.
Yeah, and then we can continue this very, very exciting conversation. Thank you so much, Matthieu, for your time, and agreeing to come to speak to the world about your work through our Kutunga platform.
No, thank you, Linda, very much for this discussion. Yeah, really interesting discussion. And you're right. Yeah, there's so much more to be said. So I look forward to the next discussion.
Awesome. Thanks. We'll stay in touch. Hey.
Thanks, Linda.
Okay, bye-bye.